Story 1. The notion that overworking oneself is something to take pride in is misguided. Rest and balance deserve the same respect as hard work. Story 2. Mob mentality. Just because a majority of people agrees with something doesn't make it true. The majority are, at best, high school graduates with no higher education. This is why we use representative democracy instead of direct democracy. This applies to everything, including platforms like Reddit, game reviews, and fact checks on social media, where mob mentality is often considered the highest truth. Story 3. Bullying occurs beyond schools. Adults also engage in it with one another. It's important to recognize our shared humanity and accept that we all have basic needs and occasional imperfections. We do not need bullies to keep us in line. Instead, we can uplift each other whenever possible. If you possess strength, beauty, wealth, or other advantages, it's worthwhile to extend help to others. It's perfectly acceptable to reject negativity and misplaced anger. Do not tolerate disrespect. Story 4. Being willfully ignorant. If someone believes that their opinion about vaccines and essential oils is more valid than decades of research by highly educated professionals, their feelings deserve to be hurt. Story 5. Paying wages below the poverty line and expecting people to make a living, then shaming them for not contributing to society, is unjust. People who work hard are just trying to survive. Systems like universities and credit cards are designed to keep individuals poor, reliant, and complacent, yet they are often looked down upon. Story 6. Being expected to wear makeup to work to look professional is frustrating. As a software engineer, my code functions just as well with or without mascara. Story 7. Being a CEO who ends up causing harm to people in various new and inventive ways, while others pretend it's just business and that CEOs should not be held legally accountable for their actions. Story 8. For some reason, loud sounds from your phone in public transportation are common. I do not understand how anyone can think this is acceptable. Story 9. Bad parenting. I have observed many children behaving atrociously in public, and the parents seem indifferent. This issue has become more prevalent in the last 10 years, especially after the pandemic. Story 10. It's more rude to tell someone they are being rude and how to change that than to be rude or misguided. I should be able to look at a stranger in the public restroom and say, "Hey, you need to rinse your hands first. You don't apply soap to dry hands." Or tap the person on the bus and say, "Hey, you need to use headphones for TikTok." Story 11. The conversation about when to have children is often brought up by others, but I find it uncomfortable. At 32 years old, I am tired of explaining that my reproductive choices are not a topic for public discussion at every family gathering. Story 12. Disposable elderly people. Today, it is a blessing if an elderly person is housed in a care home. The alternatives are horrifying. Please care for your grandparents. Story 13. Saying you instead of you. I'm only half serious. Yes, language evolves and things change and every generation has slang, but I feel like we are getting into a phase where people can't understand each other. The pendulum needs to swing back. I've been called a racist because I correct people who say paid instead of paid. Apparently, certain demographics learn differently, and there are no rules and no one cares and nothing means anything anymore. Words have meanings. Phrases have context. Stripping all of that away will do nothing positive for society. Story 14. Obscene wealth. Everyone deserves to be rewarded for their hard work, but no one earns millions of dollars without exploiting and taking advantage of others. Story 15. Health insurance does not make sense to me. Imagine being so insistent that the government should not have a say in your medical care that you end up paying more money for the privilege of letting a wealthy individual have a say instead. At least the government is elected by us. Story 16. As a Black woman, the expectation to adjust your hair for interviews, weddings, your birthday, or other significant events can be frustrating. Our natural hair is beautiful whether it is short, long, or in different textures. The pressure to alter it to appear presentable is unnecessary. Story 17. Loopholes in laws. It is sometimes acceptable to circumvent a law if the argument is framed correctly. As a result, many individuals receive reduced sentences due to loopholes that should not be permitted. Story 18. Treating people poorly and then claiming they are being manipulated when called out for their behavior is unacceptable. Informing someone that their actions are disrespectful is not manipulation. However, treating someone poorly and then blaming them for the offender's actions is manipulation. Story 19. Having no friends seems to have become the new normal. I remember a time when everyone had at least 10 friends who visited regularly. I don't know what happened, but now it feels ordinary to not have friends and spend the whole day watching Netflix alone. Story 20. Open-toe shoes are acceptable near a body of water, in the locker room, or at home. Otherwise, they are unacceptable. I worked in an office where my boss would wear sandals, pick her toenails, and not wash her hands before touching papers on our desks. It grossed me out. Perhaps this is why open-toe shoes disturb me. Story 21. Speaking as an American, it's absolutely concerning that individuals with extremist views are openly walking our streets and staging attempts to undermine our government. As Abed would put it, this is the darkest timeline. Story 22. Talking on your phone. Step away or put it down. No one wants to hear you and Great Aunt Linda discussing the guest list for the shower. Story 23. Generalization feels like too many people group everyone in a particular category negatively based on a few bad experiences. Story 24. Handing over the reins of your life and schedule to controlling managers who pay you minimal wages is problematic. The less you get paid, the less control you're allowed over your own life, and that's misguided. The third factor is that you're deemed less valuable, making you more expendable and thus more flexible. However, that's fundamentally flawed. Without baseline workers, these businesses cannot function. Everyone should have consistency in scheduling. The expectation that you must leave your schedule entirely open, without compensation for that uncertainty, and endure inconsistent hours and workdays is unreasonable. Having to ask for permission to take specific days off to meet your needs is absurd. This approach does not make sense unless the intent is to diminish people's sense of worth and exert control over them, or to avoid the necessary effort to create a functional schedule. The individual responsible for creating the schedule is compensated for their role, and much of the required labor can be streamlined through management software or even completed in a simple spreadsheet to alleviate ongoing workload. Employees are often expected to drop everything on short notice if they value their jobs, come in on their days off, and lack the ability to plan ahead for necessary appointments. They may even be forced into working overtime, which rarely provides the financial benefit expected. There may be a benefits plan in place, but they often do not provide enough hours to utilize it fully. This situation is so widespread and accepted that others facing similar challenges may antagonize and blame you for standing up or speaking out against these issues. Story 25. Cheating on tests or in any situation, including personal relationships, is a complex issue. While some may consider it divided in terms of acceptability, the fact that cheating is often overlooked and that many do not seem to care when it occurs is concerning. Story 26. Being selfish and calling it self-care or boundaries is misleading. There is a difference between taking time for yourself when needed and prioritizing your needs, versus refusing to show up for others simply because you can't be bothered. There is an increasing trend of self-diagnosing based on information seen on social media. Suddenly, many of my friends believe they have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autism, or borderline personality disorder. However, only one has been officially diagnosed by a professional. If I question their self-diagnoses, I am accused of being dismissive and invalidating. Story 27. The average reading level in the United States is equivalent to that of a 12-year-old. You are surrounded by individuals who likely cannot comprehend beyond that level. It is concerning that it is considered acceptable for adults to lack knowledge. Many refuse to learn as well. We have had to simplify everything and include numerous warnings to prevent legal issues. What an absurd situation this is. Story 28. Bringing your dog to the store. Why do you need your pet to get groceries? Story 29. Our concept of love. If it is not absolutely perfect, let's run away and find what is. There is something that is not ideal about everyone. If they are abusive, yes, leave. If they have completely opposite goals and desires, yes, leave. But if you look at them after 10 years and think you do not care quite as much, or you have been dating for a year and wish they did some small things differently, sit down and figure it out. The next person is going to have issues too, and so do you. Find someone who loves you despite your flaws. Resolve as many problems as you can, and commit to it. It is not always going to feel new and exciting. It is supposed to be challenging at times. It is life. Happy marriages are made happy through hard work in both good and bad times. Story 30. The whole idea that greed is good bothers me. I often wish I had been born in a different place. I would rather be less affluent and kind than wealthy and unpleasant to anyone who isn't a friend or family member. Story 31. LED headlights in cars. If you need your headlights to see clearly, you should not be allowed to operate a car. Daytime running lights on cars. We have the sun during the day. If you cannot see other vehicles on the road in daylight, you should not be allowed to operate a car. People who leave their headlights on during the day have no excuse. Turn them off. Story 32. Paying $200 for 5 minutes of FaceTime with a doctor just for a prescription renewal in an outpatient setting. Story 33. Liking other women online when you have someone at home will never be normal to me. Story 34. The fact that we still allow children to marry adults is concerning. It does not matter if there is parental permission or any justification related to religion or location. No child should be getting married. Story 35. Dogs charging up to you in public. Don't worry, he's friendly. I don't know that. I'm reaching for my pepper spray and have come very close to using it. Story 36. Giving a name to a child to honor a deceased sibling can be sensitive. There are better ways to honor the deceased without imposing on another child's identity. Intentions aside, some data reflects the trauma related to replacement children. Story 37. Poverty, homelessness, and drug addiction are moral failings of the individual and not a collective failure of society. Story 38. Chick culling, also known as unwanted chick killing, is the process of separating and destroying unwanted male chicks that the egg industry does not utilize. This practice occurs in all industrialized egg production, including free-range, organic, and battery cage systems. Globally, around 7 billion male chicks are culled each year in the egg industry. Because male chickens do not lay eggs and only those in breeding programs are needed to fertilize eggs, they are considered redundant to the egg-laying industry and are typically killed shortly after being sexed, which usually happens just days after hatching. Some methods of culling that do not involve anesthetics include cervical dislocation, asphyxiation using carbon dioxide, and maceration with a high-speed grinder. Story 39. Body-shaming men for having small penises while not body-shaming women for being overweight highlights a double standard. One of these issues is changeable. Story 40. Wearing pajama pants in public is inappropriate. Please put on some proper clothes if you are going out where others can see you. Are sweatpants really that much more uncomfortable that I have to look at someone's stained, cartoon-covered backside? Story 41. In the United States, the practices surrounding adoption, surrogacy, and donor conception are deeply unethical and troubling. Private adoption is a $25 billion industry. The terminology used in these contexts is concerning. The lack of regulations and the exploitation involved in donor conception and surrogacy are alarming. While external care is important and necessary for children in crisis, the methods employed in America are often questionable and harmful to children. Story 42. People are walking around like zombies, looking at their phones. Give your dog some attention during the walk. Story 43. Smoking in public, allowing children to be disruptive inside shops, and letting cats roam unsupervised outdoors are all issues that need to be addressed. Story 44. Unnecessary circumcision. If I took my baby to get a tattoo or an ear piercing, social services would be involved, but somehow cutting off part of their genitalia is acceptable. Story 45. Hookup culture is making sex competitive, akin to bragging about challenges like 1,000 men in 24 hours. It is concerning how some people feel it is acceptable to be unkind to others online or to strangers, simply because they may never meet again. This behavior is unfortunately very ugly. Additionally, there is still significant discrimination based on race, religion, age, gender, and sexual orientation, suggesting that we have not learned from history. Story 46. Education is equated with intelligence. Society tends to listen to and follow educated individuals rather than relying on their own intuition and understanding. As a well-educated person, I recognize that my father and brother, who are skilled tradespeople, often excel in practical tasks beyond my office expertise. Story 47. Giving your child the father's last name is a common practice, but I want my children to have my last name instead. Whenever I bring this up, it often leads to a heated discussion. Story 48. Consuming pornography and engaging in self-stimulation with others instead of your significant other while in a relationship. Story 49. Children who are not old enough to drink, smoke, get a tattoo, or join the military should not have access to gender-affirming care, including hormone replacement therapy, puberty blockers, and potentially even surgical procedures. It is nothing short of child abuse. Story 50. There are many objectionable aspects in American society, including a rejection of nature, a lack of emphasis on family, and an obsession with work that does not contribute to personal achievement. Additionally, the education system's focus on standardized testing detracts from holistic learning. These factors combined are significant contributors to the mental and physical health issues faced by many Americans. American society does not pursue balance or equity, leading to pervasive challenges. Story 51. I am transgender, and it has given me insight into a broader issue. Transphobia alone is distressing, but there is a more universal aspect behind it, evident in moments like this throughout history. Humans tend to scapegoat others. Some individuals find solace in directing their frustrations toward a group that is too small to defend itself. A significantly larger number enjoys witnessing this behavior. Even more are indifferent to its occurrence. This interconnected dynamic between active disdain and apathy results in a continuous cycle of human cruelty. It breaks my heart to witness it. My heart was broken before I became a target. Seeing the light of compassion extinguished in the eyes of others as they choose to hurt me is profoundly sad. Story 52. People are accepting crash diets as normal for quick weight loss. As a fitness enthusiast, I have seen how these diets backfire. Sustainable habits and yoga are far better than starvation. It is frustrating that society promotes quick fixes over genuine health. Story 53. Pricey medical attention is a reality. I understand that it is their job and they must get paid for it, but why make being healthy a privilege? Additionally, in many cases related to surgeries, there are unfortunate outcomes where patients do not survive, but sometimes this can result from errors in judgment. Story 54. Being in such an aggressive rush that you cannot treat others kindly. For example, if person A is backing out of a parking space and person B is driving down the lane with the right-of-way, person B honks to alert A to stop backing out while continuing to drive past. How difficult is it for B to stop and let A finish backing out, even if B does not need the parking space? B is in the right, but if A does not react quickly enough, both A and B may have an accident which will delay them both. In another example, when people are entering and leaving a parking lot, it is considerate to allow those exiting the lot to leave first. This helps reduce congestion for those entering. Story 55. The least informed individuals on the planet are gaining credibility and authority. The decline of expertise is leading us into another dark age. Story 56. Standardized testing is inherently non-standard. Many children today, often engaged with electronics, struggle to focus. This pressure compels educators to teach to the test rather than the curriculum, limiting the time available for topics that interest students or require more practice. Consequently, schools with lower test scores face funding cuts or are labeled as poor-performing institutions. Student progress should be based on established benchmarks and focused on individual growth. I'm not referring to classroom assessments used to evaluate progress or understanding. Story 57. Employers who immediately dismiss or refuse to promote job applicants without a bachelor's degree often do so without considering the relevance of the degree to the role. Many jobs that require degrees do not actually need them. I have decades of practical experience in a well-known company. Yet, Recruiters do not see me as a good candidate because I was too busy working 50 to 60 hours a week to complete my degree. Story 58. Driver's licenses at 16 years old. When you really think about that age, it is too young to have a vehicle at their disposal. Their brains are just beginning to understand the concept of consequence. Remember being that age and having no inhibitions? A 16-year-old is not allowed to watch R-rated movies. I know they do anyway, but they can be behind the wheel. I support getting a license to be independent and safe, but I think a couple more years is fair. Story 59. Drinking and marijuana use honestly gross me out. I support laws making them legal out of common sense, but I genuinely think less of people who use them. Story 60. Using retard as an insult is concerning. I am unsure why we are regressing, but I am hearing it used more frequently, and it makes me uncomfortable. Story 61. It is frustrating to see people body-shaming others so openly. The number of times people, even those who are not significant in my life, have commented on my weight or height is overwhelming. I often feel compelled to respond politely, especially when they are elderly or distant relatives. It is tiring to deal with this. Story 62. If you think critically about it, we tell children not to talk to strangers yet expect them to sit on a stranger's lap for a picture. Take Santa and the Easter Bunny, for example. Children are just expected to do it. They could be predators for all you know. You never know who might be under the costume. Consider the idea of the tooth fairy. She takes your teeth and gives you money. What does she do with the teeth? They can't just disappear. I was never raised with these beliefs, and even as a baby, I refused to sit on anyone else's lap except for my dad's because I knew who he was. Seriously, think about it. You don't know who Santa or the Easter Bunny is under those costumes. It could be someone you absolutely do not want your children to be with. I doubt they care enough to conduct background checks on those playing Santa or the Easter Bunny, but I truly hope they do. It's important to look deeply into these individuals. I was raised without believing in Santa, the Easter Bunny, or the Tooth Fairy, but I'd go along with it for the sake of the other kids. I would simply play along, even though I knew the truth. Story 63. As a neurodivergent individual, I find it frustrating to see people use a similar diagnosis as an excuse for negative behavior. Even if someone has been professionally diagnosed, many of us can still distinguish between someone with mental health challenges and someone who is simply being unkind. Story 64. Sport hunting, particularly of carnivores, is often conducted with the acknowledged goal of making the species extinct. Story 65. Protecting, feeding, and sheltering feral cats should not require the same roaming laws as those for domesticated dogs. Story 66. Eating meat is associated with cruelty, and purchasing meat directly supports the mistreatment and killing of animals. Story 67. Eating meat, pornography, and prostitution are all immoral, and those who disagree may be ignorant, fail to think critically, or simply do not care about the harm they cause. Downvoting this opinion indicates either a lack of awareness or willful ignorance. It may also suggest that you are not as good a person as you believe, and learning more about these issues will likely clarify that. Avoiding the truth does not make it disappear. Society promotes these practices as good or harmless, but that does not make them right. Many people are aware of this deep down. Story 68. Read the title. People are so slow. That is another behavior that is acceptable in today's society. Slow individuals. Story 69. I might get criticized for this, but sleeping with multiple people you don't actually care about romantically has become far too normalized. For example, there's a woman who is known for having relationships with numerous men, including fathers and sons. While I would never judge anyone for their choices, I personally have not engaged in this behavior. Story 70. Predetermining which words one chooses to use in speech is important. Opinions should not be regulated by the government. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.